I'm Kira Cleveland, and this is Human Intelligence. With my co host, Ned Hayes, we talk about the importance of human creativity in the age of AI. Welcome to the future. I want to welcome to the show Cameron Esbenshade. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to get to share your work and hear a little bit about your process and your creative endeavors.
Yeah.
Well, to kick us off, I'd love to know, what drives you to do your creative work? What pulled you into it?
I think, like a lot of writers, especially a lot of fiction writers, there's this kind of myth of the self that, like, I've always been a writer. I just wanted to make stories for myself. And so I started doing that. And I think for me, that is very much the story. I wrote stories as a kid. I wanted to write fantasy novels because I consumed them like candy. And then I took this huge break and didn't think that I could write anything, thought that was sort of behind me. And it was as an adult that I really gained an appreciation for how genre, particularly horror, which is the genre that I write in most of the time, can be this projection of unconscious fears. There was a little bit of a liberal arts education thrown in there that might have steered me in that direction.
Okay.
But particularly in a world, a society where you are getting up and going to work and being productive and being as responsible as you can be, to have this outlet for darkness and weirdness and to take it out of you and see it in front of you, I think is really satisfying to me.
Ooh, I like it. Taking the darkness and weirdness and having a
Yeah.
place to put it. Ooh, you make me
Mhm.
want to write. All right, so kind of, as you're exploring that space within you and creating this writing, what does a flow state feel like for you? Like, how do you get into your flow?
Yeah, I have, I think, a mix of the practical and the mystic, which seems to be what a lot of creative people share with me. My husband is a musician, and we talk about this that a lot of it is just showing up. I've decided I have 3 hours today to write, so I got to use those 3 hours. But there's also this slightly mystic element of maybe today will be the day when it just feels easy, or today will be the day where I write something and it's almost like I didn't write it, but it wrote through me.
Mm.
And, whenever that happens, I feel lucky more than I feel talented, if that makes sense. I think a lot about something that the director David Lynch is quoted a lot as saying, which is that you catch ideas like fish, and it's up to you to be in a receptive but alert state of mind so that you can catch them. And then you have very little time to clean them and use them and eat them and consume them, make them part of you. So I think that that's mostly true. I try to just make an amount of time for myself and be open to an idea.
I really like that, and it's interesting because in today's fast-paced world, I imagine it actually takes something to set time aside to do that.
Yeah, yeah, I listened to an interview with, I think, really my favorite author right now, Julia Armfield, and had a lot of success, and she said, "I don't know what to tell you. I have a full-time job. I just have to write as soon as I get home, or I'll get distracted by cooking dinner or doing laundry." And that I can confirm. I would just schedule it like I would schedule going to the gym or schedule a doctor's appointment, and I just held myself sort of viciously accountable to that time.
Ooh, ooh, viciously accountable. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I get
yeah,
that. Get that. Okay, so, within this space of inspiration, right, and
yeah.
due diligence with setting aside a time for creativity, have you ever made something that surprised you?
I'm pausing because I'm hearing myself about to say, "It always surprises me," because
Sure.
that seems a little trite almost, but what I've found is actually going in and thinking, "I don't know exactly where this is going," is a more effective approach than going in with this idea that I know exactly how a story will start, how it will evolve, and how it will end. that actually slows me down. If I just have an idea and I run with that idea, I find more success and it's more fluid, it's easier.
Okay. So yeah, in a way you allow your work to always surprise you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's actually, I think, more fun, and that's the whole point of this, right, is to, like, have fun with it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Okay. Well, I wanted to, speaking with your of your fun, I wanted to actually highlight one of your stories, one of your newer pieces. And so let's pull that up and share it. All right. So it looks like one of your most recent pieces, The Symbiont,
Yeah.
was published by Crow and Cross Keys. And you have a little excerpt you wanted to share with us right about there, right?
Yeah, they ran this last year, so it's nice to revisit it. But the story sets up with this couple that has sought counseling with a provider because they're having trouble in their marriage.
Mm,
So Dr. Willig pulled a syringe and a vial from the cabinet's drawers. In a healthy forest, she said, inserting the needle into a node of mossed bark in the terrarium, organisms trust each other at the cellular level. She capped the vial and discarded the syringe. The liquid was colorless, but David saw flecks of translucent filament floating in it as Dr. Willig hooked the vial into a small nebulizer. You've read the research, seen the testimonials. Shall we proceed?
mm.
So I'll let you read it and find out what happens. But
Yeah.
I'm a horror writer, so it's not like it goes well for everybody.
I love it. But it that was a great piece. I'm definitely intrigued for sure. How is it rereading a piece that you've written about a year ago?
It's funny. I think our choices evolve creatively, as they should. We should always, be embracing change as much as we can. But in your question about surprise, sometimes I will write something almost in this like slightly dissociated state, and then I'll read it again, and it's so gratifying to say, "Oh, that's great. How did I think of that?" Like to have that like tiny moment of the reader, which you almost never get as a writer.
I love it. All right. So, you talked a little bit about your process in that flow state, but I'm also curious, are there places that you often draw from? Like, is it life? Is it just kind of, how do you find the places you want to write about?
Yeah, it's funny that almost all of my stories are about plants because I am a terrible gardener with a black thumb who is like I'm forever at odds with my front yard that is overgrown and drives me crazy. But I think a lot about just how unknowably bizarre a lot of net processes happening right in front of us are. The fact that there are these chaotic worlds happening in small ecosystems, in macro ecosystems that can often be quite violent or feel totally alien to us. And when I've been lucky to have plant people in my lives, they will say something off the cuff. Like I had a classmate in grad school who just talked about the necessary process for like after a forest fire, like for an area to regrow
Mhm.
and just how brutal it is for these first species to establish themselves and then get overtaken by the slightly slower species and then finally the trees repopulate and the ecosystem from our perspective recovers, but there's this quiet chaotic world just on the other side of that human non-human veil, and I kind of can't get enough of it. Kind of like I It's just plants all the time, and so I feel like every time I'm in a different, like, plant biome, I feel really inspired by how just what it's like for my body to be with these different organisms.
That's really interesting. I No, truly, that's really interesting. You think about the forest fires themselves as being destructive, right?
Yeah,
But then
yeah.
the regrowing process, I wouldn't have thought to be so tumultuous. Also, like
Yeah.
the recovery. I don't know, that's really interesting. So,
Yeah, so my novel that I have completed is it resolves in this sort of elaborate, this zoomed out metaphor for a type of predator interaction that birds will have. There's a phenomenon called a mobbing call where birds, especially like pigeon type birds, they're called passerine birds,
Okay.
will will basically just cause a ruckus to freak out a predator like a raptor bird. And
Oh.
it's terrifying to see. I'd never seen it, but it was described to me by somebody who it was almost like they were experiencing a sign of the apocalypse. Like all of a sudden, the birds were all around me in this just like maelstrom of sound, and I was really taken with that, and so turned that into a technological metaphor and made a novel out of it. So I think it's always
Oh.
at the risk of, being cliche and 19th century about it, I feel like the natural world is overpowering enough to be a source of inspiration.
Absolutely. And so you took that and you said you shifted into a technological kind of framing. Could you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that without giving too much away?
Sure, sure. So the really I set about trying to answer the question, what are the principles that are driving our behavior when it comes to technology? And are those the same principles that drive our biological behavior? Is it the same, dog eat dog world when it's digital versus when we're actually physically interacting? And what can we be led to believe at this gut level? Can we see ourselves as prey objects as humans, even though we often just assume and don't even think about being the apex predator?
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So, especially in, I think, the world of AI, which is very germane to our discussion, of course,
Yes.
there are lots of different ways to think about that human large language model or human generative AI relationship. And so I picked predator prey as the relationship.
Oh, very interesting. Well, I'm intrigued to read your book. When's it
Thanks.
coming out?
It's a good question. I'm kind of exploring different publishing options.
Mm.
And because I've had so much like meaningful conversations with people through my TikTok channel and really connected with people, been lucky enough to have folks, click through several clicks just to ask me if they can read my work, which feels like a lot. I'm thinking about directly publishing myself because I'd like to release it as an audiobook. I'd like to release it in a way that is accessible financially, accessible technologically, to anyone. And so once I've kind of explored various options, I'm hoping to have it out by early next year.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to that. And I like your interest in making in accessibility, your emphasis in that. I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. So what do you have to share with creators, within your field just starting out?
Yeah, I would say just do it. It's shocking as an adult how few people will tell you no, and then it's shocking how many people will tell you no and how you will survive. When I started writing, I think I was so afraid of rejection that it caused me to not write at all. And so in classic like exposure therapy, I wanted to extinguish that fear, and so I sought, I mean, I guess I didn't seek out rejection, but every time I would get a story turned down or, trying to get a novel published, of course, is like this it's a long marathon of rejection.
Yeah.
And I just started to see that as part of it, not as an adversarial relationship, but just as these are the bumpers along the path, and so the further I get, the further along the path that creates itself I will be.
Mhm. Okay, I
Yeah.
like that. Well, and I understand you saying that it's not necessarily seeking rejection, but it sounds like you're really committed to getting exposure to the possibility of it,
Yeah.
right? Like getting it out there and
Yeah.
making sure it was seen, which is very
Yeah, it will feel so to turn that into usable advice, I guess I would say, expect it to feel terrible. when somebody says they don't like your work or they don't want to publish it or they're passing on your story or they didn't open the PDF attachment or whatever. Expect it to feel terrible and then expect that terrible feeling not to last.
Hmm, I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder for myself and things too. Take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So within your field, I feel like every creative field's a little differently, but you had touched on a bit of, AI, the LLMs, the generative AI. What are your thoughts? Like, do your thoughts around an artist creation change when you learn that they used AI in it?
I mean, I think it depends on the medium, and I would say that my perspective is going to be biased to the medium that I created. And
Sure.
so,
And we can talk about writing specifically because there is a huge range and whatnot. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think if somebody handed me their, a link to their story or a magazine that they'd published in or their novel printed and said, "This is my work that I used AI to create," I would have these two simultaneous reactions. I think my first reaction would be, "I'm not going to read that because you didn't write it." And my second reaction would be, we need different language to describe what's happened here because this is more of a curation than a creation. And so I think as we get further into an AI suffused world, our language to describe and to have relationships with these LLMs is going to have to evolve as well. But yeah, I think as with all of our values and judgments, I would imagine mine will shift, but I do really think that work purely generated by an LLM, if I just typed a prompt into ChatGPT and I said, produce me a novella that's, you know, 54,000 words in this genre, that is I guess that's a novelty, not a novel to my
Oh,
way of thinking.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
See that. I like the distinction and I agree. I think a lot of people would agree that new vocabulary is definitely going to be needed within this new age of AI.
Yeah, something that I realized I valued a lot as a writer, more than, how many copies sell or what is the tier of publication that I get or what prize.
Mhm.
Much more, I value the conversations that are generated with readers. And, that was the kind of thing I thought, oh, I won't have access to that until I'm X level of successful. But because of social media, I feel really lucky to be able to have those conversations pretty frequently. And something that is true of language and created forms is we assume that there is a mind behind that language. That's why we have language in the first place to understand each other, to begin to communicate the nonverbal from inside of here to inside of your mind. And when we have language generated by a chatbot, we assume that there's a mind within behind that language. And in this case, there isn't. And so that connection is lost or that connection is hallucinated. And that's the why behind my value set, I would say. That even if it's not happening synchronously, even if I'm sending a PDF of my work to somebody, I'm still connecting with them across time and space in the same way that reading a book, published 300 years ago is my insight into the mind of that person. And that's what's really satisfying to me.
Really appreciate you sharing that perspective, and I can understand it. The element of getting to be part of this person's story, this journey, this experience, this expression, right?
Yeah.
They went through something and shared a perspective that you then get to peek through. And I think that's a really interesting way to frame it. I hadn't thought of it that way. Okay, as a kind of a final, well, actually, I have two questions, but
Sure.
along those lines, what had you get human creator certified? What do you think the value is in certifying and kind of marking human created work?
Yeah. I mean, I was writing this cyberpunk novel. And so those broadly about whether we can trust that something is human and true or not. And so I think it was just on my mind. But I also just really value transparency and authenticity. In my day job, I'm a clinician, I'm a mental health counselor, and I really value the idea of informed consent, that when you are entering into any relationship, whether it's a clinical one with all kinds of ethical guardrails, or it's a sort of delicious book that you've been looking forward to reading, or a new film from your favorite director, there is an assumption of goodwill and kind of a lot of expectation that the viewer, the reader goes into with. And I think the more transparent we can be as creators, the more we honor those expectations, especially as they are being subverted and disappointed by, increasingly corporatized, increasingly shareholder value creating pieces of creative work.
Yeah, I hear that, and I think transparency is such a beautiful word to hold on
Yeah.
to in this time as far as values go, absolutely.
Mm.
Well, along those lines, I just wanted to give an opportunity too, if viewers want to find your work, where can
Mhm.
they go?
You can most easily find me on TikTok. I'm Cameron Esbenshade. That's Cameron, like it's mostly spelled with a C, and ESBEN Shade, SHADE, Esbenshade. And I post weird little videos. A lot of them are about horror and sci-fi movies and TV. I also talk about writing. And you'll see all of my links there and be able to communicate with me directly if that's something you would like, because I certainly would.
Fantastic, I love it, and we'll also include the links in the different posts and videos, so we'll make it easy for people to find you.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, Cameron, thank you so much for the generosity of your time, the insight into your creative process, and, it was really great to get to see some of your work, and I look forward to seeing more out in the world soon.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Kira. And I really appreciate those of us who are taking the time to be thoughtful about the changes happening in our creative world. So thank you so much.
You can find out more about any of these news items and hear the complete interview on the extended premium version of our podcast at humanintelligence.news. Today's episode was produced by Ned Hayes and engineered by Muhammad Adnan. Our analog-only human-themed music was created for the Human Intelligence podcast by Josh Pinkston of Nature and Spirit. This episode, and every episode, is brought to you by the Human Intelligence Institute team. Thanks for listening to today's episode. As always, this episode is available online at humanintelligence.news.